Hi, I'm Bill Adair, Executive Director of the Canadian Paraplegic Association. In honor of our 60th anniversary, I am pleased to introduce Mr. Ken Langford, a founder who has been with us since our inception.
Well, initially, I stayed in civilian life until I had finished law school. And then by that time, the artillery was needing artillery survey officers. So I applied for one of those jobs, was accepted. All of the battles in the desert involved artillery survey officers, who were the people that popped their heads up off the ground and did the triangulation for the guns. When the desert warfare finished, it discovered in France that there were hedgerows and there were lots of places for survey officers to hide. So they weren't being killed quite as fast as they had originally been. So I was demoted to the guns, just long enough to impair my hearing. Went over to England with the artillery, planning to join the troops on the continent as an artillery reinforcement, until they discovered that it was infantry that they were losing. So I suddenly became an infantry officer with the Calgary Highlanders. That would be in the fall of '44, when the troops had moved on up as far as Holland, and I think the farthest point at that stage was the city of Nijmegen in Holland. And they moved me up there with the Calgarys, and we spent the winter preparing for an attack on the Germans. It would have come a little bit sooner, but the Germans had a diversionary attack. I think it was known as the Battle of the Bulge, a little farther south. So that delayed things until the beginning of '45, when all along the line for, I don't know just how many hundred miles, an attack was suddenly made against the German forces that had been sitting there all winter. And the morning of that attack, I was given the job of leading the first platoon of the infantry at the northern end at Weiler. And there they, unfortunately, by that time, got the range of the Canadian troops and started dropping high explosive. And one of them caught me when I was above ground and inflicted a spinal cord injury, which put me out of action. I was replaced by the rest of the troops that passed by. By the time I could attract somebody's attention to get carried back to medical care, I found that the only people I could attract were 6 Germans who were heading back to surrender. And they were very neatly and immaculately dressed and looked as if they had been preparing for a surrender for a long time. So they picked me up, one on each corner, and carried me back until I got to waiting ambulance, and from there on to hospital in Nijmegen. After being wounded, in due course, I was given a choice of going back to hospital in England by air or by sea. I had to tell them that I came over by sea. I'd rather go back any other way. So we flew back to England and to a hospital there at Basingstoke, where they were doing experimental rehabilitation on spinal cord injuries, see if they could get them out of bed and get them to lead a useful life. I spent some time there until the hospital ship space was available to come back to Canada. At which point in Canada, the spinal cord injuries had accumulated to the point where the Canadian government was doing something about it. And John Council had the Paraplegic Association organized and functioning. And it was soon thereafter that we began to devote most of our time to civilian casualties, because the veterans were pretty well taken care of. And at that stage of the game, there was a great shortage still of folding wheelchairs, which were brand new on the market. And I discovered that in getting chairs that Veterans Affairs could get them for their casualties, but we had a hard time getting any for the civilian casualties. If I ordered 10 chairs, I'd get 1. And if I ordered 30 chairs, I'd get 3. It wasn't hard to figure out their arithmetic. But one day we needed 15 chairs. So I ordered 150 chairs. At which point Everson Jennings in Los Angeles had caught up with the demand, and the next thing I knew, 150 chairs arrived at the office. This wasn't entirely popular with the board of directors of the association, but Connie Smythe found a place down at the gardens to store them, and the bank manager was very lenient and put up the money and decided to see us through. So we had chairs for all the civilian patients for the next few years.